Hi, welcome back to Chats with Nathan. Today we're going to talk about disasters, and I don't mean forgetting your homework on the day it was due. We are talking about things that have changed how people live and survive forever, and not for the better. So let's get started with this warm and happy, uplifting episode of Chats with Nathan. To get the ball rolling, let's start off with some history. What was the Great Depression? Many think it only occurred in America, but this is not true. Actually, the case was in fact worse in some other countries like Germany. It had gotten to the point where money was worth more to burn for heat than actually buying anything. There was no official time when everything went south for all the economies, but it is agreed that 1929 was when it started to affect economies on a global scale. I personally like to think of the Depression like a line of dominoes, because of how one event would lead to another, and another, and another, and another. Well, you get the idea. But what was the thing that started this line of dominoes and catastrophic events that would change America forever? To figure out, tune in next week. I'm joking. I have not even come close to my 4-minute time limit yet. Okay, where were we? That's right. Catastrophic event that would change America forever. It was October 29th, 1929, when the stock market crashed. This day would become known as Black Tuesday. This is what lit the fuse for all the other problems that occurred in rapid succession after. The crash made stocks plummet, and made some stock almost worthless. This means people lost their money and went into debt. Big time. And as many college graduates know, with student loans to pay, being in debt is no fun. People rushed to sell their stocks to not lose any money or any more than they already had. But no one was buying. No wonder. Since multiple banks had invested clients' money in stocks, they went bankrupt. Imagine that, a bank going bankrupt. As you can imagine, this just added to the previous panic, making it even worse. When a bank becomes bankrupt, there is no money. Where is the money going? And the answer is not to the people that own it, thus making more people bankrupt. See what I mean about that domino effect? Businesses and industry were also affected. Their stocks had dropped, and this means they lowered workers' pay or their hours, or fired them entirely. And since consumers could not buy certain luxury items, it put even more companies out of business. But there's hope! Well, maybe not. The farmers in the Great Plains were having a booming crop, and life was good. But all this changed when the country was ravaged by horrible dust storms, which killed crops and people. This is another podcast, though. This, of course, added to the raging fire that is the Great Depression. All this devastation talk is really making me sad, so let's try talking about oil spills instead. More specifically, the BP oil spill. This was a real sticky situation for multiple companies, especially the oil company itself. This oil spill had both an environmental impact and an economic impact. It especially hurt the wildlife. Over 130 million gallons of oil was released into the Gulf, and 20% of that sunk down to the bottom and covered the seafloor, which killed corals and the animals that lived down there. This also made it difficult for the animals to come back to the same populations that they were before the spill. This, of course, would have a lasting effect on the environment. But what kind of economic impact would an oil spill have? Well, this spill in particular had an impact that hurt the tourist population as well as the seafood business. It hit the oil company itself especially hard. It cost the company millions to fix a problem. Just one single day of cleanup costs $6 million alone. This quickly adds up if you can't imagine. But what caused this disaster in the first place? Don't you think we could have prevented it if we could have figured out what caused it? Well, to begin, we need to travel deep under the ocean, more specifically, under an oil platform drilling for the black gold. A crack in the pipe caused by an explosion that occurred on the platform made oil leak by the gallons from the crack. There it floated to the surface and formed large slicks. So an explosion occurred on this oil platform, and the pipe that was piping the oil up actually broke and caused the oil to spill out. You would think they would focus on capping the leak first, but hey, government. Anyway, moving on with the story. The oil leak was finally capped, and the focus was on getting the oil out of the ocean. Barriers were set up to try and stop the oil from spreading, but it did anyway, because of the ocean currents that occur around the Gulf. The spill had a lasting effect on the environment, and this in turn hurt the business that relied on the environment. Of course, the BP oil company had to dump millions into this effort, and reimburse the people that lost the money. Because of the spill, it hurt their company especially. The federal government was held partially responsible for the cleanup because they technically own the water. Blah. So they were partially involved in the cleanup effort. It becomes more complicated, but that is technically the gist of it. But what in the world does an oil spill have to do with the Great Depression? And the answer is much more than one would first conceive. First and foremost, they were both disasters, and they hurt the lives of many people, big and small. Industry and the working class were affected by both disasters. The oil industry itself was hurt by the spill, but the people that relied on the waters were also affected drastically. This is mirrored in the Great Depression, because while industries were being hurt, the people that worked for the large companies were also affected, which caused that domino effect we talked about. It really comes down to how can we prevent this from happening again, and what new measures will be taken to prevent these problems. That is why it is critical to have problems like this occur in our nation. They let us learn and fix our mistakes. That's pretty much it. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Chats with Nathan. Tune in next week.